The great city of Velcaron burned beneath a sky that had turned the color of blood. Ambassador Veltara pressed her six-fingered hand against the cool metal of the observation deck window and watched her world die. The Kethavar had ruled this planet for over 3,000 years. Their silver spires had reached toward the stars with pride and purpose. Now those same towers crumbled as the Zethmori bioships tore them apart like hungry animals. "Ambassador, we must leave now," General Kethron said behind her. His voice carried the weight of defeat that had settled over their entire species in the past 6 months. "The final evacuation ships are ready. If we wait any longer, we will join the consumed." Veltara turned away from the window. The evacuation center buzzed with desperate activity. Thousands of her people moved in orderly lines toward the transport ships, carrying only what they could hold in their arms. Children clutched toys while parents whispered empty promises that everything would be fine. The elderly moved slowly, their eyes filled with the pain of leaving behind a lifetime of memories. "How many systems have we lost now?" Veltara asked, though she already knew the answer. 11 of our 12 worlds are gone," Kethron replied. His military uniform, once pristine and decorated with honors from a dozen victories, now bore the dust and grime of endless retreats. "Keth Prime will fall within hours. The swarm grows stronger with each world they consume." The Zethmori were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They did not want territory or resources in the way other species understood. They wanted life itself. Every living creature they captured became part of their collective consciousness, transformed into another drone to serve the swarm. Entire civilizations had been converted, their knowledge and memories absorbed into the hive mind that guided the endless hunger. Veltara walked through the evacuation center, stopping to speak with families as they waited their turn to board the ships. She had been their voice to the galaxy for 15 years, representing the Kethavar in trade negotiations and diplomatic ceremonies. Now she could offer them nothing but empty words of comfort. "Where will we go, Ambassador?" asked an old female, holding the hand of a small child who looked up with wide, frightened eyes. "To safety," Veltara lied smoothly. "We have allies. They will help us." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were false. For the past 4 months, she had sent desperate messages across the galaxy, calling on every treaty, every friendship, every debt owed to the Kethavar people. The responses had been the same from every corner of civilized space. The Altarian fleet, masters of space warfare who had once called the Kethavar their greatest allies, had sent a formal message expressing their deep regret, but explaining that they were repositioning their forces to protect core territories. The message had been signed by Admiral Zarthul, the same officer who had shared victory celebrations with Kethavar commanders just 2 years before. The Zanari Collective, whose advanced technology had been freely shared by Kethavar scientists, claimed they were conducting strategic analyses of the situation. Their quantum computers, capable of processing millions of calculations per second, apparently needed more time to determine if helping was worthwhile. Even the Horim Syndicate, traders who had grown wealthy through centuries of Kethavar partnership, had closed their borders. Market conditions, they claimed, made any military assistance economically unfeasible. The Galactic Council itself, that grand assembly of civilized worlds, had debated the Kethavar crisis for weeks. They formed committees, issued statements of concern, and ultimately voted to send humanitarian observers to monitor the situation. "No ships, no weapons, no hope. The last ship is ready, Ambassador," a young officer reported. "Captain Velamora requests your presence on the bridge." Veltara nodded and made her way through the corridors of the evacuation vessel. The ship hummed with the controlled chaos of a desperate retreat. Families huddled together in cargo bays that had been hastily converted to living spaces. Medical officers moved between the wounded, doing what they could with limited supplies. Captain Velamora stood at the command console, her expression grim as she watched tactical displays showing the approaching Zethmori swarm. The bioships moved like a living wave across space, their organic hulls pulsing with unnatural light. "How long do we have?" Veltara asked. 6 hours before they reach orbital range," Velamora replied. "Maybe 8 if we are fortunate. The defense platforms will buy us some time, but not much." Through the bridge windows, they could see the planet's surface dotted with fires. Automated defense systems fired desperately at the descending bioships, their energy beams cutting bright lines through the red sky. It was like watching someone try to stop a flood with their bare hands. Set course for the neutral zone, Veltara ordered. We will join the other refugee fleets there. And then? Velmora asked the question everyone was thinking. Veltara had no answer. The neutral zone was a stretch of empty space between the major galactic powers, claimed by no one and defended by nothing. It had become the final gathering place for what remained of the Kethvar people. Dozens of ships drifted there, filled with refugees who had nowhere else to go. As their ship pulled away from Keth Prime, Veltara watched her homeworld shrink in the view screen. She thought of the libraries full of ancient knowledge, the museums holding artifacts from their earliest days among the stars, the gardens where her grandmother had taught her to tend the sacred flowers that bloomed only in Kethvar soil. All of it would be gone by morning, consumed by creatures that saw beauty only as another form of energy to be absorbed. The communications officer looked up from her station. Ambassador, we are receiving final transmissions from the surface defense centers. They are requesting permission to activate the planetary destruction protocol. The bridge fell silent. The planetary destruction protocol was a final measure, designed to deny the Zethmori their prize by destroying everything they sought to consume. It would turn Keth Prime into a dead rock, but it would prevent the swarm from growing stronger. Granted, Veltara said quietly. Tell them they served with honor. She closed her eyes as the message was sent. Behind her lids, she could see the faces of the millions who had called Keth Prime home, the soldiers who even now prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, the children who would never see their world again. When she opened her eyes, she was looking at stars, cold, distant points of light that had watched civilizations rise and fall for billions of years. Somewhere among those stars were the species that had turned their backs on the Kethvar. Somewhere were the politicians who had voted to let an entire people die rather than risk their own comfort. Open a channel, she ordered. All frequencies. Emergency transmission. The communications officer nodded. Channel open, Ambassador. Veltara stood straight, drawing on the dignity that had made her voice respected in 1,000 diplomatic meetings. She spoke not as a politician or negotiator, but as the last free representative of her dying people. This is Ambassador Veltara of the Kethvar Empire, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Our worlds burn. Our people flee. We called to you for help and you turned away. Remember this when the swarm comes for you, as it surely will. Remember that you chose politics over principle, safety over solidarity. Remember that you let the Kethvar die alone. She paused, looking out at the stars that offered no answer. And remember that we believed you were better than this. The transmission ended. Behind them, Keth Prime became a brief new star as the defense centers carried out their final order. The Kethvar homeworld was gone, but its people lived on in the ships that carried them toward an uncertain future. In the depths of space, the message spread across subspace relays reaching every corner of the galaxy. Most who heard it filed it away with the other tragedies of war, uncomfortable but easily forgotten. But on a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system, someone was listening. Captain Sarah Chen sat in the command chair of the human starship Defiance, her coffee growing cold as she listened to the alien transmission for the third time. The bridge around her was quiet except for the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Her crew of 42 humans and 6 alien civilians watched the tactical display showing the location of the Kethvar refugee fleet. Play it again. Martinez, she ordered. Communications Officer Luis Martinez nodded and activated the recording. Ambassador Veltara's voice filled the bridge again, speaking words that had haunted Sarah's thoughts for the past 18 hours. The pain in the alien woman's voice was unmistakable, even filtered through the universal translator. Distance to the Kethvar fleet? Sarah asked. 4 days at maximum jump speed, replied Lieutenant Commander Jessica Park from the navigation station. But Captain, we have no authorization for this. Earth Command specifically ordered all human vessels to avoid the conflict zone. Sarah stood and walked to the main view screen, which showed the stars ahead of them. Somewhere in that darkness, an entire civilization was dying while the galaxy watched and did nothing. She thought about the message they had intercepted, about Ambassador Veltara's words asking if anyone was better than the cowards who had abandoned her people. What's our cargo manifest? She asked. Chief Engineer Tom Bradley consulted his tablet. Medical supplies, food rations, and construction materials bound for the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Nothing urgent, and nothing they can't wait another month to receive. Sarah turned to face her bridge crew. These men and women had served with her for 3 years, through exploration missions and first contact protocols. They had followed her orders without question, through asteroid fields and diplomatic crises. Now she was about to ask them to risk their careers and possibly their lives for strangers. "You all heard the transmission," she said. "The Kethvar Empire is being wiped out by something called the Zethmori Swarm. Every major galactic power has abandoned them. Millions of refugees are floating in space with nowhere to go." "Captain," Park said carefully, "I understand the situation is terrible, but Earth Command was clear. Humanity is not yet a member of the Galactic Council. We're supposed to avoid getting involved in galactic conflicts." "Since when do we need permission to help people in trouble?" asked Martinez. His family had fled Earth's resource wars when he was a child, saved by UN refugee ships that had operated without official authorization. Sarah looked around the bridge. She could see the conflict in their faces. They were military officers, trained to follow orders and maintain discipline. But they were also human beings who had just heard the desperate plea of a dying civilization. "I'm going to be honest with you," Sarah said. "If we do this, Earth Command will probably court-martial me. They might court-martial all of us. Our careers will be over. But right now there are millions of people out there who are about to be eaten alive by monsters, and no one in the galaxy cares enough to help them." She paused, thinking about her daughter back on Earth. Jenny was 8 years old and always asked her mother to tell stories about the brave explorers who had first reached the stars. What story would Sarah have to tell if she turned away now? "I'm setting course for the Kethvar refugee fleet," she announced. "Anyone who wants to file an objection can do so officially. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship when we reach the next starbase can do so with my recommendation. But I'm not going to let an entire species die because politicians are afraid of making waves." The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then Martinez spoke up. "Navigation, set course for the refugee fleet. Best possible speed. Medical, prepare to receive casualties," added Dr. Elena Vasquez from her station. "Lots of them, probably." "Engineering, prep the cargo bays for refugee housing," said Bradley. "We're about to get very crowded." One by one, every officer on the bridge confirmed their readiness to follow Sarah's lead. She felt a surge of pride that almost brought tears to her eyes. This was why she had joined the Earth Space Service, not to file reports and follow regulations, but to represent the best of what humanity could be. The Defiance changed course, its engines pushing the ship toward a rendezvous with tragedy. For 4 days they traveled through hyperspace, while Sarah composed and deleted a dozen messages to Earth Command explaining her actions. In the end, she decided that actions would speak louder than words. They dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the neutral zone and immediately saw the scope of the disaster. Dozens of alien ships drifted in formation, their hull designs unlike anything in the Earth databases. Some were military vessels scarred by battle damage. Others were clearly civilian craft, overcrowded transport ships and converted cargo haulers. "Incoming transmission," Martinez reported. "It's from the lead ship. They're asking us to identify ourselves." "Open channel," Sarah ordered. She activated the view screen and found herself looking at Ambassador Veltara. The alien woman had 6 arms, blue-tinged skin and large eyes that showed exhaustion and despair. She wore formal robes that had once been elegant but now looked worn and travel-stained. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earthship Defiance," Sarah said. "We received your transmission, Ambassador. We're here to help." Veltara's expression changed from suspicion to confusion. "Earth? I am not familiar with your species. Are you allied with one of the Council races?" "No, ma'am. We're humans. We're not members of the Galactic Council, and we're not allied with anyone. We just heard that you needed help." The alien ambassador's eyes widened. "You came all this way for strangers? Why would you do such a thing?" Sarah smiled, remembering her daughter's bedtime stories. "Because it's the right thing to do." For a moment, Veltara said nothing. Then she leaned forward in her chair, studying Sarah's face as if trying to understand something impossible. "Captain Chen, do you understand what you are facing? The Zethmori are not like other enemies. They consume everything they touch. They turn living beings into extensions of their collective consciousness. Entire star fleets have been destroyed trying to stop them." "We understand the risks," Sarah replied. "What we don't understand is how the galaxy can just watch while you're being destroyed." Veltara's expression hardened. Politics, Captain. Ancient alliances and economic interests. The Council races calculate that it is cheaper to let us die than to risk their own forces against the swarm. Sarah felt anger building in her chest. She had studied the galactic powers during her diplomatic training, learning about species that claimed to be more advanced and civilized than humanity. Now she was seeing what their civilization really meant. Well, they're not the only ones with ships, she said. Permission to come aboard, Ambassador? I think we need to talk about what one human ship can do against impossible odds. An hour later, Sarah walked through the corridors of the HFY command ship. The alien vessel was beautiful in its own way, with curved walls and soft lighting that created a peaceful atmosphere. But she could see the signs of overcrowding everywhere. Families camped in storage areas, medical bays overflowing with wounded, children playing quietly in corners because there was no safe place to run and shout. Ambassador Veltara led her to a conference room where several other HFY leaders waited. General Kethron looked like a professional soldier, tired but still alert. Captain Velmora had the weathered appearance of someone who had spent her life in space. Others introduced themselves as scientists, medical officers, and civilian leaders. Captain Chen, Veltara began, we are grateful for your offer of assistance, but I must ask you to be realistic. You have one ship. The Zethmori swarm numbers in the thousands. Even if your technology is advanced, you cannot hope to defeat them in battle. Sarah spread a portable hologram display on the table, showing the tactical situation. Red markers indicated known Zethmori positions, slowly advancing toward the refugee fleet's location. You're right, she said. One ship can't win a war, but one ship can buy you time, and time might be enough to change the situation. She pointed to the display. The swarm is following a predictable pattern. They consume everything in a system before moving to the next one. That gives us maybe 2 weeks before they reach this position. 2 weeks to do what? Asked General Kethron. We have sent messages to every government in the galaxy. No one will help us. No government will help you, Sarah corrected. But governments aren't the only ones who can make a difference. There are independent traders, mercenary groups, even pirates who might be willing to fight for the right cause. And there are other species who have been dismissed by the Council, just like humanity. She looked around the table at their skeptical faces. Ambassador, you broadcast a message asking if anyone was better than the cowards who abandoned you. Well, we heard you, and I guarantee we're not the only ones who did. Dr. Vasquez, who had accompanied Sarah to the meeting, spoke up. We also brought medical supplies and food. Our ship isn't big, but we can help with the immediate crisis while we figure out a longer-term solution. Veltara studied Sarah's face again. Captain, why should we believe that your species is different from all the others who have disappointed us? Sarah thought about her answer carefully. The human ship Valiant dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of blue light, followed by 11 more Earth vessels in perfect formation. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the Defiance as Admiral Marcus Torres appeared on the main screen, his weathered face showing both determination and barely controlled anger. Captain Chen, Torres said without preamble, Earth Command is furious. They want your head on a platter and probably mine too for what I'm about to do. Understood, Admiral. Are you here to arrest me? Torres smiled grimly. Not exactly. Officially, the Third Fleet is conducting training exercises in this sector. Unofficially, we received some interesting intelligence about a new alien threat that might pose a danger to Earth colonies. Sarah felt relief wash over her. She had known Torres for 10 years, and the man had never met a fight he wouldn't take if he believed it was right. What changed Command's mind? Your message did, Torres replied. The one where you described the Zethmori and what they do to their victims. The brass realized that if this swarm keeps growing, it will eventually reach human space. Better to stop it here than fight it at Earth's doorstep. The truth was more complicated than Torres let on. Sarah's unofficial reports had caused a storm in Earth's government. Some officials wanted to court-martial her immediately. Others argued that humanity needed to prove itself worthy of galactic respect. In the end, it had been the testimonies of the few alien civilians living on Earth that tipped the scales. They had spoken of the HFY as honorable people who deserved better than extinction. What's our situation? Torres asked. We've been working with the HFY for 10 days, Sarah reported. They've established a defensive base on Kethnara, the last habitable world in their territory. 3 million refugees are on the surface, along with whatever military forces they have left. And the swarm? Long-range sensors show them 2 days out. Maybe less. Sarah brought up the tactical display. Admiral, there are thousands of bioships heading this way. Even with your fleet, we're outnumbered 50-1. Torres studied the display, his expression thoughtful. Tell me about these bioships. What are we really facing? Sarah activated a recording from the Kethvar archives. The view screen filled with images of the Zeth-Mori vessels. Organic constructs that looked more like giant insects than spacecraft. Their hulls pulsed with veins of bioluminescent fluid, and weapon ports opened like mouths along their sides. They're alive, she explained. Each ship is grown rather than built, and they're all connected to a central hive mind. The Kethvar scientists believed the original Zeth-Mori were a peaceful species that got infected by some kind of space parasite millions of years ago. Weaknesses? Torres asked. They're vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies, but only briefly, and they adapt quickly to any attack pattern. The Kethvar Navy managed to destroy a few hundred ships before they figured out countermeasures. Wonderful, Torres muttered. Any good news? Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Actually, yes. We've been sharing human technology with the Kethvar, and they've been sharing theirs with us. Some interesting combinations have emerged. On Kethnara's surface, the integration of human and Kethvar technology was proceeding at an incredible pace. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists in underground facilities, protected from orbital bombardment by layers of rock and energy shields. The cultural exchange was as remarkable as the technical one. Lieutenant Jake Morrison crouched next to Kethvar technician Velnath, both of them covered in grease as they installed a hybrid weapon system. The young human had volunteered for ground duty, claiming he was tired of sitting in space while people suffered on planets. Your people are remarkable, Velnath said, her forearms working with practiced precision. I have never seen such determination to help strangers. Your people are pretty amazing too, Jake replied, adjusting a power coupling. The way you've organized the refugees kept morale up after losing everything. Back on Earth, we'd probably have riots by now. Velnath's expression darkened. We have had riots, Lieutenant. Despair is not unknown to the Kethvar. But we have also learned that survival requires cooperation. Above them, the combined human-Kethvar fleet took positions around the planet. Admiral Torres had initially been skeptical of alien technology, but the demonstration of Kethvar energy shields had changed his mind quickly. Their defensive systems were decades ahead of human designs. While human weapons offered raw power and versatility that impressed the alien engineers, Captain Velamora stood on the bridge of her wounded cruiser, now equipped with human torpedo tubes and targeting computers. She had been fighting the Zeth-Mori for months, watching her beautiful ships torn apart by creatures that treated space warfare like a feeding frenzy. Now for the first time she felt hope. Human vessel Defiance, this is Kethvar Command, she transmitted. Your modifications are complete. All ships report ready for battle. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. What's our readiness status? All weapons online, Lieutenant Park reported. The new Kethvar shields are holding at 100%. Engineering reports the hybrid engines are running smoothly. Good. Signal the fleet. All ships to battle stations. The preparations had taken 10 days of frantic work. Human and Kethvar crews had labored around the clock to integrate their technologies, sharing knowledge freely, despite having known each other for less than 2 weeks. The results were impressive. Human ships now carried Kethvar shield generators and sensor arrays, while alien vessels mounted human missile launchers and kinetic cannons. But it was the small innovations that might make the difference. Human creativity had always been chaotic and unpredictable, leading to solutions that more organized minds might never consider. Kethvar precision and scientific method had refined these ideas into practical weapon systems. The planet's surface bristled with defensive installations. Energy cannons designed to Kethvar specifications but powered by human fusion reactors. Missile batteries that fired rounds programmed with human chaos algorithms to confuse the swarm's collective intelligence. Underground bunkers where 3 million refugees waited and hoped. Contact, came the call from the sensor station. Bioships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The main view screen lit up with tactical displays as the Zeth-Mori fleet materialized. Sarah had seen the recordings, but witnessing the swarm in person was overwhelming. Thousands of organic ships moved in perfect coordination, their bioluminescent hulls creating patterns of light that spoke of alien intelligence and hunger. My God, someone whispered on the bridge. Admiral Torres's voice came over the communication system, addressing all ships in the combined fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Torres. Today we stand together with the HFY people against an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy. The so-called advanced civilizations have abandoned our allies, but we will not. We will show the universe what courage looks like. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of human history. The HFY asked for help, and we answered. They offered us their friendship, and we accepted. Now we fight not just for their survival, but for the principle that no people should face extinction alone. All ships advance to attack positions. Let's remind the galaxy what it means to stand by your friends. The human and HFY fleets moved forward in formation, a tiny force facing overwhelming odds. But they moved together, united by bonds forged in desperation and strengthened by mutual respect. On the surface of Kethnara, Lieutenant Morrison put down his tools and picked up his rifle. Around him, human soldiers and HFY defenders prepared for what might be their final battle. The young man thought of his sister back on Earth, who always said he was too stubborn to know when to quit. Velnath, he said to his alien partner, if we don't make it through this, I want you to know it's been an honor working with your people. The HFY technician touched his shoulder with one of her hands. Lieutenant, if we do not survive, at least we will die knowing that someone cared enough to stand with us. In space, the two fleets approached each other at a significant fraction of light speed. The Zethmori swarm moved like a living thing, individual ships darting and weaving in patterns that seemed random but were actually precisely coordinated. The human HFY alliance maintained disciplined formations, their hybrid technologies creating sensor signatures the enemy had never encountered. Range to target, 4 million kilometers in closing, reported the tactical officer. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These people had followed her into the unknown, risking their careers and lives for aliens they had never met. In a few minutes, they would discover if human stubbornness and HFY honor were enough to stand against the hunger of the swarm. All weapons, prepare to fire, she ordered. Let's show them what happens when you threaten our friends. The battle for Kethnara was about to begin, and with it, humanity's introduction to galactic warfare would be written in fire and determination. The Zethmori had consumed entire civilizations, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to abandon its allies no matter what the cost. The universe was about to learn that some bonds could not be broken, and some friends were worth dying for. The space around Kethnara erupted in violence as the two fleets collided. Streams of energy lanced between ships while missiles traced bright arcs across the darkness. The Zethmori bioships moved like a school of predatory fish, flowing around the human HFY formations with deadly grace. Captain Sarah Chen gripped her command chair as the Defiance shuddered under enemy fire. The new HFY shields flared with blue light, absorbing energy blasts that would have crippled her ship a week ago. But she could see on the tactical display that the Allied fleet was being pushed back despite their technological advantages. Direct. Hit on the Endeavor, reported Lieutenant Park. She's lost main power. Kethmar is reporting heavy casualties. Added Communications Officer Martinez. They're requesting emergency medical support. The battle had been raging for 6 hours and the pattern was becoming clear. The Zethmori could replace their losses faster than the Allies could inflict them. Every destroyed bioship seemed to spawn 2 more from the larger hive vessels, while every damaged human or HFY ship represented irreplaceable personnel and technology. Admiral Torres appeared on the main screen, his uniform torn and a bandage covering a cut on his forehead. The bridge of his flagship, the Valiant, showed signs of battle damage. Sarah, we need to fall back to the second defensive line, he said grimly. We're losing ships faster than we can count. What about the evacuation? Sarah asked. Still in progress, but it's going to take another 12 hours to get everyone off the planet. The Zethmori are already sending landing forces to the surface. On Kethnara, the battle had come to ground. Lieutenant Jake Morrison crouched in a defensive trench carved from alien rock, his rifle spitting energy bolts at the organic monstrosities advancing across the refugee camp's perimeter. The Zethmori ground forces were even more horrifying than their ships, twisted amalgamations of different species all connected to the same hungry consciousness. Fall back to checkpoint 7, shouted Sergeant Williams, her voice barely audible over the sound of weapons fire and alien screams. Jake helped a wounded Kethvar soldier to his feet, supporting the aliens' weight as they retreated toward the next defensive line. Around them, human Marines and Kethvar defenders fought side by side, their different fighting styles somehow complementing each other perfectly. Lieutenant Morrison called Velnath from behind a makeshift barricade. The children's shelter needs escort to the evacuation site. Can you spare soldiers? Jake looked around at his depleted squad. They had started the day with 20 Marines. Now he counted 8 still on their feet, and 2 of those were walking wounded. Take Corporal Davies and Private Chen, he ordered. Get those kids to safety. What about the defensive line? Davies asked. We'll hold it, Jake replied, though he wasn't sure how. The Zethmori kept coming in endless waves, and every fallen defender was one fewer gun between the monsters and the refugees. In the underground command bunker, Ambassador Veltara coordinated the evacuation with human efficiency officers. The process was a nightmare of logistics, trying to move 3 million frightened people through limited transport capacity, while a battle raged overhead. The northern shelter has been compromised, reported a Kethvar aide. 2,000 refugees are trapped. Send rescue teams, Veltara ordered, though she knew they had no teams to spare. I'll go, said Lieutenant Commander Jessica Park, who had volunteered for ground duty when her ship had been crippled. Give me 10 Marines and the best route. Veltara looked at the young human woman with wonder. Park had never met the refugees she was volunteering to save, yet she spoke as if their lives were more important than her own. Commander, the area is overrun with Zethmori ground forces. It would be suicide. Then we'd better move fast, Park replied, checking her weapon. Those people didn't ask to be in this situation. They deserve someone willing to risk everything to get them out. The rescue mission launched within minutes. 10 human Marines and Park moving through the war-torn landscape toward the trapped refugees. They fought through 3 separate Zethmori positions, losing 2 Marines but refusing to retreat. When they reached the shelter, they found families huddled in the darkness, protecting their children from the sounds of battle above. We're here to get you out, Park announced, her universal translator converting her words to the Kethvar language. Follow us and stay low. The evacuation took 4 hours, with the humans forming a protective corridor around the refugees as they moved toward the transport ships. Zethmori creatures attacked repeatedly, but the Marines held their ground with stubborn determination that reminded Veltara of stories about human soldiers from their ancient wars. In space, the battle continued with desperate intensity. The Zethmori had broken through the outer defensive lines and were now attacking the planet directly. Admiral Torres watched in frustration as bioships landed on Kethnara's surface, disgorging thousands of the creatures that would convert every living being they touched. We need more time, he told Sarah over the communication link. The evacuation is only half complete. Then we buy more time, Sarah replied. All ships target the hive vessels. If we can disrupt their command structure, maybe we can slow down the ground assault. It was a desperate gamble. The hive vessels were the largest and most heavily defended ships in the Zethmori fleet, protected by swarms of smaller bioships. Attacking them directly would mean flying through a wall of enemy fire with little hope of survival. Captain, said Dr. Vasquez from her station, I'm reading massive energy buildups in the hive ships. Whatever they're doing, it's big. Sarah studied the sensor readings and felt her blood turn cold. The energy signatures matched theoretical models for planetary bombardment weapons, the kind that could sterilize entire continents in minutes. They're preparing to glass the planet, she realized. They'd rather destroy everything than let us evacuate the refugees. The realization spread through the fleet within moments. The Zethmori were abandoning their usual pattern of consumption and conversion. Instead, they would simply destroy Kethnara and everyone on it, denying the Allies their small victory. All ships emergency attack pattern, Torres ordered. We stop those hive vessels or everyone down there dies. The human and Kethvar fleets threw themselves at the enemy with suicidal courage, breaking formation to race toward the massive organic battleships. They flew through storms of enemy fire, their hybrid shields flaring and failing as they pushed deeper into the swarm. The Defiance shuddered as a bioship latched onto her hull, its acidic secretions eating through the armor plating. Sarah could hear emergency alarms throughout the ship as her crew fought to repel boarders that had broken through the hull. Engine room to bridge, came Chief Bradley's voice. We've got Zethmori creatures in engineering. They're trying to reach the reactor core. Hold them off, Sarah ordered. We need power for just a few more minutes. On the surface, Lieutenant Morrison watched the sky light up with explosions as the space battle reached its climax. He could see the running lights of human ships diving toward the massive hive vessels like tiny insects attacking giants. Some of the ships were already burning, their hulls torn open by enemy fire, but they kept flying. They're all going to die up there, said one of his Marines. Yeah, Jake replied, but they're doing it so we can live. That's what friends do. He thought about his family on Earth, his girlfriend who had begged him not to volunteer for military service, his parents who worried every time he shipped out to some distant star. They would understand why he was here, fighting for people he had barely known 2 weeks ago. They would understand because they were human, and humans didn't abandon their friends. The first hive vessel exploded in a bloom of organic fire, its death scream echoing across subspace frequencies. The Valiant had rammed it at full speed, Admiral Torres choosing to sacrifice his ship and crew rather than let the weapon charge complete. Torres, Sarah called over the communication link but received only static in reply. The second hive vessel began firing its planetary bombardment weapon, a stream of energy that carved a molten scar across Kathnara's northern continent. But before it could complete its sweep, Captain Velmora's cruiser struck it amidships, the Kethvar commander making the same choice as her human counterpart. The battle continued for another hour, both sides taking terrible losses. When the shooting finally stopped, the space around Kathnara was filled with debris from dozens of ships. The Zethmori swarm had been bloodied but not broken, while the Allied fleet was reduced to a handful of damaged vessels. But they had bought the time they needed. The evacuation was complete. 3 million Kethvar refugees safely aboard transport ships that were already jumping to hyperspace. The planet below was scarred and burning, but its people lived. Sarah stood on the bridge of her battered ship and looked out at the stars. They had won, in the sense that they had saved the people they came to protect. But the cost had been enormous. Admiral Torres was gone, along with half the human fleet. Captain Velmora and most of the Kethvar Navy had died buying precious minutes for their people to escape. Captain, Martinez said quietly, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. 6 months after the Battle of Kathnara, the neutral zone had transformed from empty space into a bustling hub of activity. Dozens of space stations floated in formation, their docking bays busy with ships from species the Galactic Council had never bothered to acknowledge. The largest station, jointly built by human and Kethvar engineers, served as the headquarters for what was being called the Coalition of the Forgotten. Captain Sarah Chen walked through the station's central plaza, still amazed by what they had accomplished. The wide corridors bustled with beings from a dozen different worlds, all species that had been dismissed or ignored by the major galactic powers. Kethvar children played alongside human youngsters, their laughter echoing off walls decorated with artwork from both cultures. Captain Chen, called Ambassador Veltara, approaching with her characteristic grace. The Kethvar diplomat looked healthier than she had in months, the desperate exhaustion replaced by cautious optimism. The council session is about to begin. Are you ready? Sarah nodded, adjusting her new uniform. The coalition had its own military now, combining the best elements of human and alien tactical doctrine. The rank insignia on her collar marked her as a coalition admiral, a promotion that had come with responsibilities she was still learning to handle. They entered the council chamber together, a circular room with seating arranged to accommodate different alien physiologies. Representatives from 17 species took their places, each one carrying the hopes of people who had been abandoned by the galaxy's established powers. The session began with reports from the front lines. The Zethmori swarm was still advancing, having consumed 3 more star systems in the past month, but now they faced organized resistance for the first time. Coalition fleets using hybrid human Kethvar technology had successfully defended 4 different worlds that would otherwise have fallen. The key is coordination, explained Captain Velneth, now commanding a mixed-species crew aboard the cruiser Unity. The swarm expects each species to fight alone, using predictable tactics. When we combine our approaches, we confuse their collective intelligence. Sarah studied the tactical displays showing their recent victories. The pattern was clear. Whenever coalition forces worked together, Sharing technology and tactics freely, they achieved results that surprised everyone, including themselves. "What's the status of recruitment?" she asked. "Better than expected," replied General Morrison. Jake Morrison had survived the ground battle on Kethanara, earning a field promotion and the respect of soldiers from multiple species. "The word is spreading. Species that have been ignored by the Council are reaching out to us. The Valdrani just sent a delegation, and the Hegemony Mining Collective wants to discuss providing resources." The transformation had been remarkable. What had started as a desperate alliance between humans and Kethvar had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a true coalition of equals, where species shared technology, resources, and decision-making without regard to military strength or economic power. "There's been another development," Veltara announced. "We've received a communication from the Galactic Council. They want to meet." A murmur ran through the chamber. The Council had been strangely quiet since the Battle of Kethanara, watching as the coalition grew stronger and more organized. Their silence had been interpreted as either contemplation or preparation for some kind of response. "What do they want?" asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the coalition's chief medical officer and xenobiology specialist. "They claim to be interested in coordination of anti-swarm efforts," Veltara replied with obvious skepticism. "They want to meet on neutral ground to discuss joint operations." Sarah felt a familiar anger building in her chest. The same politicians who had abandoned the Kethvar to extinction now wanted to coordinate with the forces that had actually done something about the threat. "Let me guess," she said. "They want us to follow their strategic plan and operate under their command structure." "That would be the traditional approach," General Morrison agreed. "The question is whether we're interested in being traditional." The debate that followed lasted 3 hours. Some coalition members argued for cooperation, pointing out that the galactic powers had vast resources that could make the difference against the Zethmori. Others insisted that any alliance with the Council would result in the coalition being absorbed or controlled by the same entities that had proven their cowardice. "The fundamental issue," said Dr. Vasquez, "is trust. How do we work with people who have already demonstrated that they'll abandon their allies when things get difficult?" "We don't," Sarah replied firmly. "But we can work alongside them as equals. They want to coordinate? Fine. They can coordinate with us, not command us." The decision was made to accept the Council's request for a meeting, but on coalition terms. They would meet in the neutral zone, on the station that had become a symbol of what could be accomplished when species worked together instead of competing for dominance. 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself in the same council chamber, but now it held representatives from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Councillor Zarthul led the Altarian delegation, while the Zanari Collective had sent their top military strategists. Even the Horim Syndicate had arrived, their merchant princes suddenly interested in the coalition's success against the swarm. "Councillor Zarthul," Sarah said without bothering with diplomatic pleasantries, "welcome to the neutral zone. I trust you're impressed by what the inferior species have accomplished." Zarthul had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Admiral Chen, we acknowledge that the Council may have made strategic errors in our initial response to the Zethmori threat. We are here to discuss how we might work together going forward." "Are you?" asked Ambassador Veltara, her voice carrying years of accumulated bitterness. "Because the last time we asked for your help you were too busy with economic analyses to prevent genocide." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The galactic powers sat on one side, radiating the authority they had wielded for centuries. The coalition representatives faced them, representing species that had been dismissed as primitive or irrelevant. "Perhaps," said Councillor Velthara of the Zanari Collective, "we could focus on our common enemy rather than past disagreements." "Past disagreements?" Sarah stood up, her human anger finally breaking through diplomatic restraint. "You call the abandonment of an entire civilization a disagreement? You call letting millions of people die, rather than risk your precious fleets a strategic error?" She gestured toward the viewport showing the bustling station outside. "You want to know what we've built here? We've built something you apparently forgot how to create. An alliance based on mutual respect and shared sacrifice. Every species here has put their lives on the line for the others. Can you say the same?" Zarthul's expression hardened. "Admiral, you may have achieved some tactical victories, but the Zethmori threat requires resources and coordination. on a galactic scale. Your coalition, while admirable, lacks the industrial capacity to defeat the swarm permanently. He's right, said General Morrison quietly. We're punching above our weight, but there are limits to what we can do with 17 species and a few dozen systems. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of her allies and enemies. The council representatives expected her to admit defeat, to acknowledge that the coalition needed their help desperately enough to accept subordination. They had come here expecting to dictate terms to grateful inferiors. You're absolutely right, Counselor, she said finally. The coalition alone cannot defeat the Zethmori, but neither can the council, as you've proven by losing a dozen systems while we've been saving them. She activated a holographic display showing the current tactical situation. Red markers indicated Zethmori positions, while blue and green showed council and coalition forces respectively. Here's what I propose, she continued. True coordination. Not the council giving orders to lesser species, but genuine cooperation between equals. We share intelligence, technology, and tactical coordination, but each alliance maintains its own command structure and makes its own strategic decisions. Unacceptable, Zarthul said immediately. Military operations require unified command. The Council has the experience and authority to lead such efforts. The Council has the experience of losing, replied Ambassador Veltara, while the Coalition has the experience of winning. The meeting went on for hours, with neither side willing to compromise on the fundamental issue of authority. The Council representatives could not accept that the species they had dismissed as inferior might be their equals. The Coalition members could not trust leaders who had already abandoned them once. Finally, Councillor Velthara made a different suggestion. Perhaps we could begin with limited cooperation, joint operations on a small scale, to build trust and test coordination protocols. Sarah considered this. It was not the recognition of equality she wanted, but it was a start, and in the meantime, the coalition could continue to grow and prove itself. Very well, she agreed. Joint operations with shared command and equal authority. We'll see how committed you really are to stopping the swarm.